Let's talk about the Federal Reserve because, folks, we are in, I believe, a Great Depression. We are sitting in a Great Depression, and anyone who says we're not is just full of it, is spinning numbers and trying to make people feel better. I don't like to sugarcoat things. When you look at this data, when you look at how bad it's gotten, we are sitting in a Great Depression. New jobs numbers just out a few minutes ago point to a catastrophic level of job loss in this country. Let's take a look at these initial jobs claims right now. Through May and into March, right now we've seen an additional 3 million people file for unemployment last week. Now, the numbers that I had before the show started were at 33 million people out of work. 33 million people out of work. But now we're expecting upwards of 17% unemployment in June, thanks to some new numbers that we just got out a few minutes ago, which is pointing to another 3.6 million people without work and up to 33.6 million people without jobs right now. You can spin it however you want, but this, my friends, this is a Great Depression. Now, I know what Mark Zandi would say from Moody's Analytics, that to have a Great Depression really would have to be 1 year of sustained double-digit job losses or unemployment. Regardless of semantics, we're here now. We're here sitting in this mess right now. And that's where, we've seen a record number of amount of spending coming out of the US government. So take a look at the amount of spending right now and what we're collecting from taxes. Right now, the American people just don't have the money to be able to pay taxes, to get money into the federal government. So federal spending is at an all-time high in 2020. It set a record of spending, the largest we've ever spent in American history. That's the largest, the most amount we've ever spent in American history. $3.3 trillion. And we're running a $1.48 trillion deficit. This is the least amount of money that the federal government has ever brought in, while at the same time spending the most amount of money that they've ever spent. So the revenue right now that the government is getting from the American people is awful. It's absolutely awful. Because taxes, no one's buying anything. Everyone's home, unemployed. This is why Fed Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell spoke out and said Congress needs to get a move on because American people need money in their hands to keep the economy going. 70% of the gross domestic product in America is fueled by consumer spending. So if you and I aren't spending money because we don't have it, this shuts us down, keeps us in a perpetual state of depression. Wall Street is happy, doing fine because the Fed is able to give all this liquidity to the banks. And they're buying up all these junk bonds. So Wall Street's doing great. They're fine. They're happy. But the American people are hurting. So Jerome Powell talked about this and talked about this sustained recession. Take a listen to the chairman yesterday.
But the coronavirus crisis raises longer-term concerns as well. The record shows that deeper and longer recessions can leave behind lasting damage to the productive capacity of the economy. Avoidable household and business insolvencies can weigh on growth for years to come. Long stretches of unemployment can damage or end workers' careers as their skills lose value and professional networks dry up, and leave families in greater debt. The loss of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses across the country would destroy the life's work and family legacy of many businesses and community leaders.
Think about that for a minute. We saw that during the Great Recession, right? Which was individuals who basically their skills kind of dried up because we couldn't really recover for like 5 years. Think about the Great Depression. It took us almost 2 decades to recover in the Great Depression. And we're at an opportunity right now where we can actually get some additional liquidity into the American people's hands and come out of this okay. I'm struck by right now where Congress's head is on this, because it's basic economics. What he's saying is, at the Fed, we are a lending body at the Federal Reserve. We can lend money to banks, right? Keep money floating through the system so people can get mortgages. People can borrow. Businesses can borrow. Without it, the country would fall apart. So that side of the economy is doing fine right now. Wall Street, fine. But he's saying we as a lending body at the Federal Reserve we can't just cut a check to the American people. That's Congress's job, he went on to say. He said Congress and legislators have the ability They're in charge of tax and spend, and they can get money into the hands of the American people. And Paul Krugman the other day, economist, said the very same thing. He said, if money were in the hands of the American people, like it should be, he said, we have the infrastructure to minimize this pain right now. Except that the rollout of this has been awful.
What we have now is really, there are two things. We have huge problems of implementation. We have these relief programs, which are the right thing to do, but a lot of the money is just not making its way through. It's being run through state unemployment offices that are completely overwhelmed. They just are not able to handle the load, and in many cases, they were sort of designed to deny unemployment benefit.
That getting money into the American people's hands right now is exactly what we need to make it through. Getting $2,000 a month in people's hands so that they can spend, buy groceries, keep the economy going, could help us bounce back. And by the way, you'd be paying taxes. So then the government would be able to recoup some of this money that they're not being able to get right now with this spending, getting this massive deficit because they're not collecting taxes. So it keeps everything floating if you have more money in your pocket. It's basic economics, folks. And Paul Krugman saying, look, we had all of these pieces in place. We had the stimulus. We had money going out for people that, on unemployment benefits. But these unemployment offices have been overwhelmed. They have been just crushed. They don't have the right systems in place. The way that these checks got rolled out was a disaster. Many of you, I'm sure, still in the chat today are still waiting on your check that you should have gotten, a few weeks ago. People with unemployment benefits are still waiting on those. Veterans benefits, SSI, SSDI, Social Security, not getting your direct deposits. So we have the infrastructure. We could have done this very well, and we still can. We just need to get more money into the hands of the American people. But make no mistake, folks, we are in a recession. Here's Moody's Analytics' Mark Zandi, who watches this very closely. Listen to what he has to say about it.
The prospect of a depression, given the data we have today, Mark, your thoughts there?
Well, I think if we reopen too quickly and we see infections rise, get a second wave, and that causes more business disruption, we may not shut down again, but certainly it will scare people, spook people, and weigh on the economy. That would be the fodder for a depression. In my nomenclature, depression would be double-digit unemployment for more than a year. If we get through this period without another wave, then this will end up being a really bad recession. But if we get a second wave, it'll be a depression.
Of course, Mark, they're worried about reopening too quickly. And if we get back, and that's the point, we don't have to rush back into reopening so quickly if we can get money in the hands of the people. Reopening is not necessarily the answer. And I know that Republicans are really pushing for us to get back out there and get people back to work. But if you don't have the testing in place and everyone gets sick and we have to go back under lockdown, what good does it do? So that's why Fed Chair Jerome Powell said this: we need to spend more right now, get money into the hands of the American people that are hurting, get monthly checks, get other stimulus money into their hands to keep that GDP floating and going. That's why, otherwise we're going to be sitting here with this $1.4 trillion deficit because we don't have the money to pay taxes. We're not buying things. The government's not collecting revenue, and yet it's spending money like crazy. So this is exactly what we need right now. We need this money in the hands of the American people. So that brings us really to the question of reopening right now and whether or not we should reopen this country. And we have, right now we have just really troubling data coming out of some of these different states who are attempting to reopen. We've seen this in other countries right now. We saw this in South Korea. They were really a beacon of amazing response to COVID-19. Then what happened? Then they reopened and they had a spike in cases because people at nightclubs, et cetera, gathering spots, they saw a new surge in cases. Country of Lebanon reopened and then shut down again because of a new explosion of cases. So states now across the country, and just take a look at some of the areas that are seeing some of these hot spots. Now this data, by the way, this is not fake news. This comes straight out of the White House. This data comes from the White House task force, okay? And NBC News reporting on this, that infections in certain areas have shot up 72% in areas like Amarillo, Texas, and one of the worst spots, Central City, Kentucky, which is, of course, in Mitch McConnell's backyard. in Kentucky. That saw a 650% increase in confirmed cases in Central City, Kentucky. One of the things that they realized in this data, they're also looking at that tracking data that was provided by Google, which showed people's interactions and then when people got infected by how close in proximity they came to other people. What they found is that social distancing mostly works in grocery stores. So by people were keeping their distance in grocery stores, they noticed that the infections did not pass from person to person if they went to grocery stores because they were keeping their distance. Also, they said in parks, when people were going to parks and walking their dogs, it showed on maps that they were not getting too close and they were able to social distance, they were able to keep infections from spreading. So grocery stores, going to parks, and keeping your distance worked. What didn't work, and it was actually kind of a big failure, is people getting on public transportation. So people getting on buses, people getting on trains, trying to go to work or other places. These are areas where people were not social distancing and they saw a spike in infections. So reopen, get back to work. You all want to pile into a subway train in New York City? Have you ever been on a subway train in New York City? I used to live in New York City. No way. I mean, they're nasty when we didn't have coronavirus, you know? Remember Pizza Rat? Famous Pizza Rat dragging a box of pizza. I mean, that's like, are you gonna go down there, especially in the hot, sweltering summer where there's no air conditioning at all and those nasty subway lines? So public transportation, buses. You know, you get into a bus and you're trying to hold, you know, they're driving away and you're falling over and you're grabbing that metal railing. Do you think that bus driver is cleaning those railings after every stop? No. So that's where infections have been spreading, is public transportation, according to this data. But again, taking walks and going to grocery stores was okay. Now, the data is showing from the White House that Texas is likely to see its biggest spike yet in cases, along with Wisconsin, which now is reopening, Georgia, which is reopening, Utah and Indiana have also eased their restrictions. So let's just keep an eye on those states over the next week or so. So Wisconsin with their biggest reopening announcement now, and the courts shooting down the stay-at-home orders. So now anyone can go do what they want, I guess. If you're from Wisconsin, do you agree with that? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. You know, I stand firm in my belief, and I agree with the Fed, that we need a big round of spending in the American people's hands right now. Because with that spending with that money in the American people's hands, we spend money. We can go on Amazon and order groceries, have them delivered to our houses. We can do those things to pay our bills, to pay our mortgages, keep the economy flowing, so that the federal government can collect taxes off of that money. You know, you're going to use it to buy groceries, you can pay sales taxes. State and local governments need that money. So does the federal government. When you look at this data, with 1.4 trillion deficit in April alone. Unbelievable. So there we are. That's the very latest. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. We do these shows daily to bring you this information, and we have a great community here of people who interact and are looking for information about their personal finances, how to understand retirement, and how to truly build wealth in this economy right now. So go ahead and subscribe and hit that like button.